I got a fantasy matchup for you guys. Ricky Hatton facing Miguel Cotto at super lightweight. Who would win? We're going to go into that in some detail. First of all, for those of you who think that Miguel Cotto and Ricky Hatton were not of the same era, that would be absolutely incorrect. In fact, if you look at Miguel Cotto, he first won his title in 2004, if I'm not mistaken. It was for the vacant WBO title against Kelson Pinto. Right there. Okay. Now, Ricky Hatton actually won his world title back in 2005 against Costa Zoo. He won the IBF world title, and that was June of 2005. Miguel Cotto won the WBO version of that title, and it was in September 11th of 2004, a couple months before Ricky Hatton. Okay, another interesting thing that a lot of people don't know is these guys actually shared certain opponents. Take, for instance, Miguel Cotto faced Carlos Mosa when he was undefeated. He was a world champion at the time. And guess what? So did Ricky Hatton. Ricky Hatton actually faced Carlos Mosa just a couple months later after he faced Costa Zoo. About 2 years after Miguel Cotto had faced him. Miguel Cotto became champion before, of course, Ricky Hatton. But check this out. That's not the only person. Both of them also share an opponent in Floyd Mayweather, and they also share an opponent in Paulie Malignaggi. Miguel Cotto faced Paulie Malignaggi when he was undefeated in 2006, whereas Ricky Hatton faced Paulie Malignaggi in 2008, 2 years later, where he defeated him to retain his minor title, IBO title. He actually stopped Paulie Malignaggi. Isn't that something? And of course, they both faced Floyd Mayweather, Ricky Hatton in 2007, Miguel Cotto 5 years later in 2012. So they actually shared common opponents, which showed that they were contemporaries. Of course, it was at different weight classes. Cotto faced Floyd Mayweather at super welterweight, whereas Ricky Hatton faced Floyd Mayweather when he was at welterweight. Both of them actually were at welterweight as well. Ricky Hatton having faced Louis Collazo for the WBA welterweight title, which he won, and Miguel Cotto also being at welterweight, I believe. Let's see, what time was that? Louis Collazo was in 2006. He went up to welterweight, and in the same year, 2006, Miguel Cotto actually faced his first challenge at welterweight, which was Carlos Quintana, right after the Paulie Malignaggi win in super lightweight. Carlos Quintana. So the same year, December of that year, he did it, and Ricky Hatton had his fight in May of that year. So Ricky Hatton again could have faced Miguel Cotto for a unification bout there. So they were contemporaries, and I just wanted to show you a couple other things. Now, of course, Miguel Cotto would have been a bigger guy because he ended up at super welterweight, even won the middleweight championship, whereas Ricky Hatton, though, was a big super lightweight, most he ever did was welterweight, right? Now, here's Ricky Hatton here. Now, I'll show you a couple other things that I thought were very interesting about Ricky Hatton. So, Ricky Hatton won against Costa Zoo. Then he defended against Carlos Mosa, who was at the time the WBA super welterweight super lightweight champion. Okay, he had just beaten the Guyanese guy. I forgot what his name is. Went up to welterweight, faced Louis Collazo, came back down to super lightweight, and beat up Jose Luis Castillo, and then he faced Floyd Mayweather in 2007 at welterweight. Now, here's the interesting thing about that. All this time, Cotto was a welterweight. So, there was some iffy things, like, Hatton realized, I'm just going to go back down to super lightweight. But here's where they could have fought each other. So, that's why I didn't say welterweight. They could have fought each other at lightweight. Why? Well, Ricky Hatton actually won the lightweight championship title against Costa Zoo in 2005, when, of course, Miguel Cotto was there. He chose instead to face Carlos Mosa instead of Miguel Cotto. Who did Miguel Cotto face in 2005? He faced he had 3 fights. He faced DeMarcus Crowley in 2005, who was a former champion. Then he faced Abdulev. Okay. Then he had that great epic fight with Ricardo Torres. So he had 3 fights with the WBO title. Now, to be honest with you, the WBA is a much more the WBC, the WBA are much more respected titles. The IBF is another recent one that came off the WBA, if I'm not mistaken, and that's also a respectable title. But the WBO is not as respected. So if I were Ricky Hatton, I would have picked Carlos Mosa over Miguel Cotto, even though Miguel Cotto was the harder name. Carlos Mosa had just become world champion himself. But this is when they could have clashed with each other, okay? When they were world champions to a unification bout. They never did. Now, it's interesting how a lot of people talk about Floyd ducked this person and ducked that person, but nobody talks about Ricky Hatton ducking anybody or Miguel Cotto ducking anybody, I'm just saying. Anyways, this is when they could have faced each other. Now, based on that, what do we know about Miguel Cotto, and what would be my pick? Who would have won? I'll tell you why I think a certain fight would have won. Okay, Ricky Hatton was a very busy fighter. He was an inside fighter. Miguel Cotto is not particularly an inside fighter. And from his fight with Antonio Margarito, we learned that Cotto sometimes could box you. But if you get on the inside of him, you could do some work on it. We see what Shane Mosley saw with Antonio Margarito. So if Ricky Hatton could have taken Miguel Cotto's shots, particularly his left hook to the body, and particularly his left hook to the head, then Ricky Hatton would have had a very good chance of getting to the inside of Miguel Cotto, getting all kinds of problems, and probably winning that fight. And we know Ricky Hatton could take a hell of a punch, and he was relentless. But having said that, the guy with the better defense is Miguel Cotto, and so I could see Miguel Cotto outpointing Ricky Hatton, going southpaw, landing certain shots on him. I don't know if he would have stopped him, because Hatton was very voracious, but he definitely would have compiled a lot of points on him. And I've seen Cotto be able to handle somebody who wants to fight him on the inside only. So, because I thought that Cotto would have been the bigger boxer, basically the stronger guy, I would think, of the two. I could be wrong. And the fact that Cotto went all the way up to middleweight and fought and won a title, I would pick Cotto. Now, I know Cotto's, I would think, is a better outboxer than Ricky Hatton. But Ricky Hatton does a lot of interesting things with his head movement and so on to get on the inside. But I do think that, aside from Kostya Tszyu, Ricky Hatton's opposition, and at least he beat, it was sizably good. Paulie Malignaggi is known for sticking the jab pretty well. Juan Moscanzo was a tough guy to really face, but he was a little bit older at that time, as was Castillo. Louis Collazo, very skilled southpaw, tough guy to beat, and he is able to beat Collazo. He was able to get the nod on him, even though Collazo probably would close the show and knocked him out. Mausa wasn't that great. He was rangy and lengthy. Costas was an excellent fighter. So when you look at Ricky Hatton's resume, I don't see anybody like Miguel Cotto on there. Strong, could box, fundamentally sound, and yet a guy could grind you down. It was a bit dirty. So I would say that the physicality of Cotto versus Ricky Hatton would be very interesting. I would have picked Cotto to beat Ricky Hatton based on his boxing skills, physicality, his kind of rough and rugged way of doing certain things, the tricky things he did. Plus, when you look at the level of opposition that Cotto faced at the time that Ricky Hatton would have been presented, he had already faced guys like Ricardo Torres, DeMarcus Coley, Randall Bailey, Carlos Mosa already, who he defeated by knockout, and also he faced really challenging guys like Cesar Bazan and John Brown. So I think Cotto would have had a lot more experience going into that fight, facing Ricky Hatton with tough fights. Whereas Ricky Hatton, he had tough opposition, but for the most part, besides the Ben Takis and the Vince Phillips, he really didn't have any really pressing opposition. Even though he did also face Freddie Pendleton, so he had a lot of Tony Pett for range and length. He had some pretty good opposition, but no real life and death battles. Whereas Cotto had that. So I think that Miguel Cotto would have had much more of the tougher fights and therefore tougher opposition. I think that would have given him some edge over Ricky Hatton. So 2020 hindsight is good. So my pick would have been Miguel Cotto. Now somebody asked, my boy asked Tommy Temper if it would have been by stoppage. I don't know if he would have stopped Ricky Hatton, Miguel Cotto. I don't know if he would have stopped Ricky Hatton, but this is what I do that. I know that Cotto would have beaten him. Ricky Hatton walks into certain shots, so If you see Manny Pacquiao knock him out with the left, and I could see Cotto going southpaw and lining up that left shot and just running it into Ricky Hatton and probably putting him down. So it's possible he could have knocked him down or even stopped him. So that's how I look at it. But I want to hear what you have to say. Who do you think would have won in that fantasy matchup? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Peace.